I saw something where you said last year that this is India's moment. What went wrong?
Globally, I feel that we are in the midst of overvaluation. SpaceX IPO is just a sign of that. America is the biggest bubble. AI is a huge trend. So was the internet. But I think we will see some trade-off in global markets at some point. I mean, to put in context, China has 6 million factories and we have about 300,000 factories. I don't think that this is a permanent issue. In the grand scheme of things, I say again, it's a blip. It's been so much easier to make money in the stock market. Just people got in their head that I can make a 20% IRR. I think that tide is turning. You've seen in the last 18 months, people have now compounded their money. It's not so easy to make money in equities. Equities, if earlier it was 13 to 15%, I think it's more like 10, 12% going forward.
Welcome to the Growing India podcast. This is a joint initiative between Groww and me, Monica Hallan. I do these conversations so that the stories that shape our country can be told clearly and honestly. Today's guest is really special. He was financially free at 40 and now spends his time building institutions towards Vikasit Bharat. I am delighted to welcome Mr. Ashish Dhawan. On a Sunday morning, here we are recording. Thank you for making time.
Thank you for having me.
I'm going to start with the growth story. I think that's something which is really at the top of all our minds, because I saw something where you said last year that this is India's moment. All of us thought that, right? We had all our ducks in a row. And it's taken one event to derail us. So we were deluded. There was a structural problem. What went wrong?
Yeah, look, India obviously is dependent on the world for energy, and there's an energy shock right now. So clearly, it's a hit to the economy, and it's a difficult phase. But I think in a way, it's an opportunity also for us to accelerate reforms. I mean, my own view is we did a bunch of macro reforms which accelerated growth, but we haven't done a lot of micro reforms, factor market reforms that would make India truly competitive. So this is an opportunity in a way to think about how we wean ourselves off the energy dependence. Now, that's going to take a long, long time. It's not easy to do it. But for sure, I think it's an impetus for us to look at how we can become more competitive. So I think the structural story is very much there. This is a cyclical shock. It may last 6 months, a year, 2 years. But in the great story of the next 20 years, I think it'll be a blip.
So right now, there's a lot of doom stories. Every time you open anything to do with social media or news. How much of that is really an issue? Like, how worried should people be?
It is an issue. I mean, it's going to be inflationary for sure. The government has shielded us, but I don't know how long that can last. So yes, again, there is, but I don't think it's a spiral that's a perpetual spiral. Mm-hmm. I think it's one where there will be slightly greater inflation. I think at the same time, I don't think we're going to see massive cutback in production because India's got a long ways to go in terms of building manufacturing capacity. We have an opportunity to export much more with our upcoming FTAs. I think we are becoming more competitive. So I worry less about, unlike China, which has massive overcapacity, I don't think India will have overcapacity. I mean, to put in context, China has 6 million factories and we have about 300,000 factories. So I'm not saying we need to get to 6 million. But even that journey to 1 million, if you're going to be a competitor, is there. So I think the structural thing, because we're so underpenetrated today, I don't think that this is a permanent issue. It's in the grand scheme of things, I say again, it's a blip.
Right. And you mentioned earlier about the factor reforms, which would obviously, so labor, the needle has moved because of the bills last year, the act last year. But the obvious ones are really land, agriculture, fertilizer, for example. I mean, there is a view that instead of doing this huge subsidy for everybody, why not do cash transfers?
Yeah.
With the sort of election results we've seen right now, shouldn't the government right now be taking these calls because they've got the momentum? Political, so you need political will to do these reforms. So agriculture was tried, it failed, okay, but it needs to be done. So
let's look at it sector by sector,
and
look at what our disability is relative to China, Vietnam, and how we're closing the gap. So electronics is one sector where India's manufacturing was non-existent. We were just importing everything from China or elsewhere. I think thanks to the PLI, thanks to Apple coming here, we've got a production base, at least for mobiles. Started with assembly. Everybody did a lot of choo-choo that it's only 15% value addition. But that's okay. You always start downstream and then go upstream. So now with the PLI for components, you've seen how many companies have applied. And we will have an ecosystem here and probably go to 35% value addition. By the way, because it's a global value chain in electronics, even in China, they're at 40% value addition. They're not at 80%. It's never going to be an industry. You'll always be getting parts from Japan, Korea, Taiwan, America, elsewhere. So in electronics, we've become competitive now. We did a number of things, not just the incentive, but to lower import duties on components. Earlier, we were at a 9% blended tariff rate. Vietnam was at 0.5%. Not in this budget, but the prior one, we lowered it dramatically. And a number of other issues. And now we've created 3-4 clusters that I think are quite competitive. If you look at a sector like apparel, right, we have underperformed. Apparel, if I take out textile, our exports are 15 billion. They've stagnated for a decade. Bangladesh is at almost 50 billion, Vietnam 50 billion. China is still at 100 plus billion. Now, the major disability there was raw material, not labor. Our labor is quite cheap. In some cases against Bangladesh, labor may have been more expensive because of the minimum wages being raised in many states. But many states offer a wage subsidy to neutralize it. On the raw material, the issue was QCO, non-tariff barrier. Yes. So now that that is being removed, I think that will make us competitive in synthetics, in man-made, etc. If you look at other sectors there where metal is an input, like say, can we be competitive making washing machines? So if you talk to a company like Amber today, we have almost 80% value addition in India. Okay. Significant value addition, which didn't exist earlier. We're still not competitive from an export standpoint because the input cost is too high. Metal is a very high component in a washing machine. So I think we have to look at this at a micro level. What is our disability sector by sector? How do we improve it? If there are certain parts that are critical, like say in IT hardware, laptops, unless we do the display unit here, we're not going to be competitive. So because we have about a 10 to 15% disability versus China today. And unless we get an anchor tenant like Dell or HP to come like an Apple, we're not going to be able to build the supply chain. And so we need to make it attractive. So I actually look at this sort of at a micro level. I think the agriculture one, I mean, fertilizer subsidies and all, I'm sure the government is looking at. I mean, if you look at something like agriculture, our exports, by the way, are about 50 billion. Yeah. And they've been increasing. Yes. And I think we have a chance to get to like 100 billion. Yeah. A small country like Vietnam already does almost 70 billion of agri-exports. So I think India has very fertile land, has low-cost labor. There's no reason why we can't be competitive even in that sector. But of course, it's a sector we need to protect also, because so many livelihoods depend on that sector.
Right. And also agriculture, I think we've done very well in those, especially things like shrimp export.
Yes, seafood has done very well.
Which is such a, it's so counterintuitive that something so delicate, something so perishable, we are actually doing, we are exporting to, I think, Europe now and globally. So after that US tariffs, we've actually opened up other markets. Yeah. Correct.
I think shows, I mean, look at Vietnam, category by category in agricultural exports. They've become competitive and they've built a global base. So I think we should be looking at these examples. And the reforms are, by sector, because there's some broad reforms like cross-cutting, like labor code. So you bring that. There's some broad reforms around land use, broad reforms on deregulation, which government is working on, and faster environmental clearances, on creating better industrial parks, so it's easier for you to do plug and play, like the PM Mitra parks for textiles and apparel. So these things are the enabling conditions, very, very important. And we need those to be competitive. And then sectorally, we need to look at it and see, are there some nuances in each sector that make us uncompetitive? And how do we reduce that disability? I think incentives can only work for a period of time. They provide a fillip, an initial kickstart. But ultimately, industry has to stand on its own feet and be competitive.
Right. You're obviously interacting a lot with the government. You see the political will right now that this is, if we lose this 30 years, we are in a middle income trap. Is that palpable in the corridors?
Look, I think action is being taken.
Okay.
We always wish it were done faster because I do think we, like you said, we have a narrow window. It's not just our demographic dividend or the cliff we'll hit, but it's also, I've been to China twice in the last 6 months. The Chinese dominate in every manufacturing sector. They're 35% of world manufacturing output. We used to think, I mean, the economic theory is that labor costs in China have gone up and that in sectors like apparel that are labor intensive, it'll just go now to Bangladesh, India, Africa, wherever else labor cost is cheaper. But the Chinese are automating very rapidly. And they want to hold on to every industry. So even if you look at apparel, China's export today is 7-8 times that of India. So I think we have to move at lightning speed because that window, right now apparel is still done by hand.
Yeah.
But as the robot has the dexterity to be able to do it, you'll see robotization creep in. In electronics assembly, Apple has created so many jobs in India and through the value chain. Again, once a robot has the dexterity, the robots right now are these big arms you see in auto factories and things like that, but they are going to be much more dexterous going forward. So I think the window is 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
And so I really feel we need to move fast. If you don't have the know-how, then you can't move up the value chain in that sector.
Right. The other thing which I always question is that, like right now we've seen, I think a Vietnamese company come in with the electric cars.
Yeah, VinFast.
Yeah. So we see a lot of the, into the country, but our strength is really the services sector, whether it is, like we were discussing, the instant delivery or I think the financial sector has done exceedingly well. So if you want to open a bank account, it's just not a problem. You try doing that in Europe, you try doing that in other parts of the world. It's so clunky. Why are we not expanding out? Is it regulation? Are there, like, why don't we go and do in banking and financial services what we see here?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think that Indian banks did try to expand. ICICI set up this UK operation, Canada operation. It ended up being a failure, to be honest, so they retrenched. I think the home market has been so good. And for private sector banks, they were eking out more market share versus public sector banks for a long period of time over the last 2 decades. That there was possibility to grow at earlier 18-20%, now 13 to 15%. Very good ROEs in the Indian market because in a way the public sector banks were more inefficient. So they in a way allowed you to make high net income margin because you were always more efficient, whether it was CASA, whether it was the high yielding assets, efficiency, technology, all of that. I think public sector banks have become more efficient. I think now in the next few years is the time when these banks have now garnered some critical mass for them to go outside India. They will largely need to do it through acquisitions versus de novo. So there's a chance in services beyond the typical knowledge services where India has played, like IT services, GCCs, etc. I mean, the other big categories are categories like financial services, transport, etc., where we need to go global. But I wouldn't say that services is our forte. I think India has demonstrated that in areas in manufacturing, we can be very competitive. And like in two-wheelers, we have been competitive. So that should say there's no reason why we can't be competitive in other sectors as well. And I think without a manufacturing economy, we will not be able to achieve our Viksit Bharat goals.
Okay. I want to segue into the markets not at an individual level, but there is this story that our markets are overvalued. The PE ratios, the price to earning ratio, is very high. Now, one way that it goes down is that the prices go down. The other way is that the earnings go up. Corporate earnings, profits. Which happens first?
So, look, globally, I feel that we are in the midst of overvaluation. I mean, the SpaceX IPO is just a sign of that. I mean, America is the biggest bubble, and when there's everything is AI focused right now. AI is a huge trend. So was the internet, but I think we will see some trade-off in global markets at some point in time. I don't know when. I think India is well positioned. See, we were overvalued, there's no doubt. And it is the reason why a lot of capital started to pull out of India, starting in 2024. And then, of course, more recently, it's the AI trade which has taken money away. We are still somewhat overvalued, if you ask me, because the cheap stocks are really old economy. Anything that's relatively new economy, forward-looking, has a huge multiple attached to it. So I do think it'll be earnings growth that will eventually get us there. But if there's a global sell-off, you'll first see valuations come down, and then, But long term, I look at things long term.
Right.
We never invest with a 1 or 2 or 3-year horizon in mind. I think if in India you have a 5-year horizon, your earnings growth will more than compensate for any decline in PE, even if PE is 20% overvalued or 25% overvalued at this stage. So I don't worry about it as a long-term investor.
Right, because right now there is this sort of, experts, and the conversation is that it is really the Indian retail investor, the SIP, the guy who's putting $3,000 every month.
Yeah.
She has caused this overvaluation because the valuations are too high, and this person goes on investing at whatever value. So is the retail investor seeing something that, for example, the corporates are not seeing? Because I understand that private investment is coming in at steel, cement. I think we are seeing expansion of capacity. Yes. But in the other areas, I believe there is slack. There's still we are at 75% capacity. China is dumping. A lot of companies are waiting and watching to see where the AI axe falls. So who is right? The companies to wait and watch, or this, the SIP investor who's saying, no, I think this will work?
No, I think the companies make rational decisions. That, if you have slack, why would you put more capital to work? So I think companies make rational decisions, is my view, which is why Indian entrepreneurs and companies have generated amongst the highest ROEs in the world, because they're not willing to just throw capital around. They are very, very good at capital allocation in general. Having said that, I do think that our companies have become too conservative. If you look at R&D, all of corporate R&D in India is $10 billion. It's a pittance.
Yeah, work hard has happened once.
Glenmark had something, but even that development happened mostly in Switzerland and the US. Yeah. So innovation has to be a big focus, and R&D has to be big. And that's where I feel companies are getting it wrong. I think they're right in terms of the hard asset. They'll put it up. So I think one is just on R&D, they need to invest much more. And two is on exports. I still think too many Indian companies were mollycoddled. We had higher tariff barriers. It was easy to make good money just in India, and you never ventured abroad. But I think that now that our companies are competitive, they're larger, we must have global ambition, and we must be more daring. And that then takes away some of the slack, right? Then you need capital for that. So I think Indian companies also should be, asking for more capital. And that'll then absorb much more than the SIP money coming in. Right now, it's really IPOs of new age companies. The older companies, if they were more ambitious, like Sun Pharma, I think has been very ambitious with their acquisition. We need to see many more of those going forward. So both on the R&D side and on the international expansion side.
But are you seeing any of this happening? Because we need more. So there is more. This is like one of those strange markets where you actually have retail money is coming in through various pipelines.
Yes.
Okay, yes. It's direct. It's through funds. It's through insurance. It's through NPS. It's through PF. Incremental.
Yes.
15% goes into index funds. So you have fat pipelines of retail money coming in. So the supply of cash is there, but we are not seeing the supply of paper. So should it not be a great time for government to disinvest
It is a great time for government to disinvest, there's no
Yeah.
doubt. But I think that's one part. I would hope that instead, given we're lucky, there are very few emerging markets that have such a large investor base
Right.
who invest through SIPs, so you predictable. And right now, FPIs have turned negative, but they will come back someday. So we're going to have massive inflow of capital coming into our markets. And I think the way to absorb it is partly IPOs, but partly our own companies raising their ambition. That's why I was saying the
Right.
acquisition part.
Right. Right.
There's a big opportunity
Right.
to do that. And if the world, globally valuations change, and by the way, valuations are more skewed even in the Western world towards the hot sectors. There are a number of assets still available in developed countries at much lower valuation. Sort of like Sun Pharma, buying an asset, there is clear multiple arbitrage. Where you trade in India is very different from where the asset trades.
Right.
Now, you need to manage it well. It's not going to have the same growth. You have to get synergies, all of that. I think our entrepreneurs are capable of doing that. So, but they're just not daring enough when it comes to acquisitions, comes to R&D. So I think that needs to change because we will have a wall of capital coming in,
Right.
and it cannot get absorbed just through IPOs.
Right. Right. Okay. So again, because there is so much noise around it, it is okay for somebody to go on investing at a retail level if you have that allocation in equity. It's a good idea to continue.
I think generally in the broader market, it's okay because it's very hard for people to time the market.
That's right.
And I think globally what has happened is if you don't do this, you tend to invest when the market is an all-time high and you tend to divest, at the absolute wrong time when markets are low. So I think the nice thing with SIPs is it's almost automatic, right?
Correct.
And I think for the retail investor, that's a good thing. As long as it's diversified, you're putting it into
Correct.
the broader index through a product, it's okay. If you're starting to punt on just the small caps or just on some hot sectors, then you run a real risk, even if you do this systemic investing.
So when I look at a market or a country like the US, the productivity gains will come through very high investments, which we are seeing in sectors like AI.
Yes.
All that I need here is drinking water, roads, electricity, healthcare. This is very low-hanging fruit in terms of a productivity gain. I mean, the productivity gain that I get from having cooking gas instead of firewood is huge. Or through electricity in a room in a village minus no electricity, I'm immediately getting a huge productivity gain.
Yes.
To be able to travel from my house in a metro rather than, any other. So these are all very low-hanging fruit. What do you think, what can we do right now? What can the government do to increase this productivity today in India? Because AI, of course, is a story, but we don't have the capital, we don't have the chips, we don't have that. So it's happening. But we have to address our problems at the level that we are.
Yes.
I just feel it's low-hanging fruit.
Completely agree with you.
Yeah.
One of the best books I read, I wish I could remember the name of the author, but it's a fat book on America's productivity over a long period of time. And basically the highest productivity in the US was between 1870 and 1940. Very high productivity because those innovations were fundamental. Electricity coming into every home, the cars, widespread adoption of transport, rail connectivity, cutting down time, so logistics costs coming down, communication with Alexander Graham Bell's innovation. These were so fundamental that even innovations like mobile technology, the internet, etc., pale in comparison when you look at the productivity data, right? So I completely agree with you. For India, we have a huge productivity unlock through very basic stuff.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I think I'm a believer in not just consumption-led growth, but in more hard infrastructure, capex-driven growth. So I think India needs to keep investing much more in hard assets. Government already has stepped up to 3% plus of GDP from the center. The states then put in money. I think government needs to keep doing more. And particularly areas like urban are completely neglected, which is where all the incremental growth is. We're putting right now a lot of money into rail and road. Those are the two biggest ticket items on the capex side. I think we really need to increase urban in a significant way. And then, of course, so I think on the productivity side, basic stuff. AI, we should be a fast follower. There's no reason for us to be at the frontier right now.
Yeah.
I think we will be able to take open models, distill them, create small models like we're doing. We'll be able to lower the token cost. We'll develop applications at scale. I think that's what India ought to be doing on the AI side. There's no point putting the hundreds of billions of dollars. They're better spent in the real economy for India, building more highways, putting into rail, putting into our urban. Look at the transformation of Mumbai with the, billions of dollars that have gone in. That is a much higher ROI than building, cutting edge frontier models from an India perspective.
One area which you think they should really focus on. So one, of course, is roads infrastructure. But you mentioned this urban renewal. This is a state subject. What is it that the center can do? Because I believe a lot of political will is coming from the center, and there are some states which are very aggressive. I would put Uttar Pradesh right at the center of that. Tamil Nadu has done exceedingly well.
Yeah.
Odisha has some stories. So you see few of the states getting the idea that this needs to be done.
I still think we're way under investing. I think the center has a role to play because there's no money at the local level, right? Municipalities in India have no, other than Bombay, they have no money at all because property taxes are negligible and they have no revenue mobilization capability. The money is all at the center and at state level. And we put into urban infra something like 0.5% of GDP. And we need to put in something closer to 1 to 2% of GDP. So I think we need a massive fillip. I think you see Bombay is a classic case where, the hardware, building the Atul Setu, building the coastal road, building the metro is a game changer for Bombay. So firstly, I think we need to look at cities through the lens of economic development. Earlier, if I asked someone 5 years ago, what's the GDP of a city? What's the GDP of Surat? Nobody knows the answer. What is the economic vision for Surat? What should we be doing? What transport building a unified transport plan, right? Unlocking land, much higher FSI in our cities, which will lead to more vertical development. Ease of doing business in our cities, attracting more investment into our cities. I think that's what will drive our growth. But the hardware, putting in some basic infrastructure is a key starting point. And the center can provide a massive fillip, and so should state governments should co-invest along with the center in making that happen.
Right. Any example which comes to mind? Mumbai, you have said, but other than those roads, the minute you step 5 minutes into the rest of the city, you don't want to be there because of the mess that has been created with the builders and the whole nexus. There are no roads, the traffic is terrible. So is there maybe even at a smaller scale something which comes to mind as to what an Indian urban center should look like? Because again, out of that central Delhi area, the rest of the Delhi is very chaotic. You come back from abroad and the contrast is so sharp. There's no pavement. It's just a mess. Every vehicle is coming in every direction at you. So this is just failure of governance where as a law-abiding citizen, you feel overwhelmed by what comes at you.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree, which is why I think we need to invest much more. Look, I think the governance changes are harder in our context because of political economy. I don't think states will want to give the power that was envisioned in the 73rd, 74th Amendment to have strong mayors in cities. If you did that, the mayor of Hyderabad would be more powerful than the chief minister of Telangana. Right? I don't think that's happening. Having said that, Hyderabad has been transformed. How was it transformed? Because one is they had unlimited FSI, and Hyderabad did vertical development. Two is you had a chief minister who went and brought the initial
Yes.
Microsoft and ISB and those investments into
IRDA.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's become the GCC capital of India, and it's reasonably well planned if you look at Hyderabad today. I mean, Indian cities will never be as well planned, but it's a mega city today. Greater Hyderabad, probably 12 to 15 million people,
Yeah.
much lower cost of living and much lower cost of office rent than Bangalore.
Yes.
So I think that's a good model, if you ask me. I mean, even NCR, I know you were saying that there's lots of issues, but I think with the RRTS coming in, and now more of these RRTS, this suburban rail kicking in, KMP, EPE, this new UER2, it really, if we need 5x of this, you do 5x of this, you'll see the difference. Our metro system today in Delhi is now almost 400 kilometers.
Yeah.
7 million people ride it daily. Imagine if we didn't have a metro system, what would happen?
Right.
So I really think if you go to China, they may have overdone it, but it requires massive investment. Or even if you go to Bangkok, which was a chaotic, terrible city 20, 30 years ago, has really, through massive investment and better planning, really it's become a nicer city today. Go to Kuala Lumpur, which is 8-9 million people, Greater Kuala Lumpur. It's a fantastic city today. So I don't think there's any reason why we can't make it happen, but it'll take time. It'll require massive investment.
Okay. A lot of this audience is fairly young, as most of India is. And every sort of generation has a story in terms of the investment opportunity that they see.
Yes.
For my generation, it was that 91 reform. It just sort of, if you were educated, willing to work, and you showed up, you did well. Okay, that's all that you didn't have to be super bright. You just you showed up and you did well. So then there was that IT boom. So every generation has something which works for them. This 25 to 30-year-old today in India, what is it that's fueling them? What should be fueling them?
So I think there are three distinct opportunities, which are big ones going forward. So one is, I think India's deep tech moment has arrived. We have the ANRF, RDIF, we have a few deep tech funds. You see these sparks of innovation, like Wockhardt you talked about, or Glenmark. You see now in the space sector, some interesting things are happening. I think this is the beginning. We're just scratching the surface. And with more money coming in, more specialized funds, and more Indians coming back from the US and elsewhere, we're going to see in the next 10, 20 years. The way China moved up very dramatically, so big boost to R&D in the corporate world, but startups, the genuine deep tech startups, this is the moment. So I think that's a mega trend for the next 20 years. And we will see a flourishing of the biotech sector. We'll see a flourishing of, chip design companies, etc. I think a second mega trend is exports. I think we have Indians now who've gone abroad, they've been educated, they've come back. Even in these business families you see now, they've been trained outside. They have a global exposure. I think they need to have the ambition now to go out and, so the way, in Japan and Korea, you really bet on the exporters. And that's where you made your money, right? Because they were globally competitive and they had a world market, which is so much larger than the home market. So I think that is the next big opportunity for India. And a third one is always the consumer. Because as India grows, as we go from a 4 trillion to a 10 trillion to a 20 trillion, particularly consumer discretionary, staples will not grow so fast. Only so much food you can eat. But the discretionary stuff is going to grow at a much faster pace. So I think those three mega trends are very much there, and young people should start businesses in these areas.
So we are seeing this new generation setting up these businesses, and you mentioned, children of the businessmen who've gone out and they've come back, but they're opening family offices. Mr. Uday Kotak has been from every stage saying that please invest. So the story of it's so much easier to preserve the money than get into opening a factory. Why?
Yeah, look, I think also it's partly the timing. The last few years post, it's been so much easier to make money in the stock market. Just people got in their head that I can make a 20% IRR just on my own, or giving it to a mutual fund, or giving it to my wealth manager. the expectations that were set. And it's really hard to generate a 20% return in hard assets, and there's more risk and, etc. I think that tide is turning. You've seen in the last 18 months, people have not compounded their money.
Right.
It's going to be hard. I think people will realize that it's not so easy to make money in equities. And by the way, in equities, if earlier it was 13 to 15% was a long-term trend for India, I think it's more like 10, 12% going forward. So I think that as reality sets in, this will change. And there'll always be a next generation of, some of this is a trend everywhere. Some of the next gen of business people will do family offices, but that capital will then flow into the real economy. There'll be a next generation of entrepreneurs or someone coming out of Nagpur or, some smaller town who's more ambitious, who wants to do the hard work. And I think the other thing is India deregulates. We make it easier. Maybe people won't be as daunted by setting up a factory anymore. I think part of the problem was the license Raj was removed, but the Inspector Raj never was.
Right.
You had the heavy hand of the state. So as we give the entrepreneur more freedom, hopefully more people get excited about starting businesses as well. So I'm optimistic. I think it's okay if some people set up family offices, as long as that capital stays in India and comes back into the stock market, into startups, into private equity. And that's where the money actually is going, if you look at it.
Right. And I'll pick up on that point where you said that it's daunting to set up a factory. And I will segue into corruption. Very near where we are sitting, we've had one building collapse.
Yeah.
We've had one fire. Lives have been lost. The police beat constable and the MCD employee, he's able to see some mosquito larvae on a third floor terrace cooler, but he couldn't see the unauthorized floor. He couldn't ask for the fire NOC. So there is endemic corruption. And the owner of this place saying, "Chalta hai, Delhi mein sab chalta hai." And we know ki sab chalta hai. All you have to do is bribe. So the owner of the building is in jail, but we don't know the name of the beat constable who might have got, who definitely would have got something, or the MCD who's responsible. So we never see the faces of the people who have allowed this to happen. So there is endemic corruption. Now, I don't want to complain about it. You are now an institution builder. How do you think at a policy level? What do we do? Because it's not just them, it is also us. I will build an authorized balcony. I will cover it up.
Yeah.
I will turn the shaft into my kitchen. I will do all sorts of nonsense. And when the guy comes, I will give him 500. Like, not me, but like we are the sorts, we'll stand on a red light on an empty road. But, that's how Delhi works, or everywhere works. How do you, I don't even know if it's a policy solution. How do you change the character of a people?
No, it's very hard. There's no doubt. I think, there's a big push for deregulation, and there's two big efforts by the government, the high-level committee and then the CAPSEC committee, or a CAPSEC group that's working on it, group of secretaries. I think they're really working very fast in terms of the stroke of pen changes.
Yes.
I think the mindset culture change is much harder. Now, one way to get around it is in many areas what they've proposed and what's happening is self-certification. So in some areas, now when you're making a building, obviously it's not possible. But in certain areas, when you're starting a business or something, anything that's low risk, you should be able to self-certify. Because there's again a money-making opportunity. Somebody comes to you. Medium risk, third-party certification. So in progressive states like Andhra now, instead of a government person certifying, they've got a third-party certifier, and they've empaneled the certifier for buildings up to a certain height. And third is creating greater transparency. But having said that, the corruption is endemic, and I don't think it's going away with a jhatka. It's a gradual process. Through greater digitization, through greater moves like third-party certification, we can break the back of this nexus. It's a nexus. It's also with the pollution control boards. We know that companies are non-compliant. These guys are taking money, so they're hand in glove. But to say that companies should somehow wake up and become more honest is not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's so I think it's a gradual process, is my sense. Unfortunately, Monica, I don't think it's going to change, because we can make the stroke of pen changes, but the culture change is very hard, and it'll only happen over a period of time.
Any examples of a country which was able to do it? Because from where we sit right now, also in its infinite wisdom, the Supreme Court did not allow the election bonds. So there's a whole channel of election funding which could have been brought into the light, which has now gone back into the dark. So somewhere I feel it sort of leads from there as well, that the parties do need money.
Yeah.
If you've moved that back to cash, so despite UPI, cash levels have gone up. If you look at RBI data, where is that money?
Yeah.
We know where that money is. It's sitting somewhere.
So I think one way people have solved for this is do it in certain zones, because you can't solve for the problem endemic, at an overall scale. So I'll give you an example, say in manufacturing, right? We know it's very hard. Everybody asks you for money. It's very hard to start a business. You have to run around to different departments to get approvals. There's a time issue. It can be unpredictable at times, and every NOC is it. So if you look at China, the way they did it, apart from single window and all, they said in certain zones, the SEZs, they empowered a single authority to have all the powers and just streamline and give you approvals. In a way, that was one way to. In Vietnam, what they've done is the industrial park owners are actually mostly private. Government has given them an IP license, industrial park license, and given them a lot of authority to work with the state to make things happen much faster. So in manufacturing, at least in certain zones, in certain clusters, you can do this. And I think this idea government is actually coming around to, that, look, I may not be able to bend my everything everywhere, but at least in Dholera, I can do it differently. At least in Sri City and 100 such industrial zones, I can do it differently. In our cities, I think it's going to take longer. The kind of issue that you were talking about. There, I think this third-party certification is the only way to break the back. Like with the boiler certification in a couple of states, because there's anyway very few boiler inspectors, they moved to third-party certification. And that helped, because again, you break the nexus between the two. Now, there could be a nexus formed between the third-party certifier but we've got to hope that at least if you're moving to third-party, the state can hold them more accountable than its own people.
Right, we can hope. I'll move to a dream that almost every 30-year-old, 20-year-old has right now, which is early retirement. They have this vision of making it big, 5-star life, traveling the world, chilling on the beach. You were financially free at 40, and you did not sort of retire. You sort of segued into something else. And here we are on a Sunday morning, recording a podcast, you're working. I think explain to this young audience what retirement really means. It's not stopping work, because if you have 40, 50 years ahead at age 40. And I think work sort of defines who we are in a lot of ways. And if there is, so when you go to school, college, work, it gives you a structure. People underestimate the benefits of that structure, because then there is lawlessness if you don't have that imposed structure. I think just take them through this idea that retiring doesn't mean a holiday on the beach.
Yeah. So firstly, I would say I have a lot of hope for the young generation. And I think I really admire, I see it through Ashoka, because I go there once a week, and amazing youngsters, I'm not the Indian uncle who wags his finger, and I think they are much better than our generation, honestly. I think the aspirations are different. I'm all for, throughout my life, I've also believed in having fun and working hard together. So I don't think they're orthogonal completely. And a lot of, so I would say for younger people, definitely look at saving some money, because financial freedom is something that's amazing if you can achieve it. So, but to do that, you do need to save and invest wisely. So that's at the core. And then beyond that, of course, by all means, go to the beach, go to Goa if that's what makes you happy.
Yeah.
If you want to go live in Goa, do that. But I don't think you'll be satisfied if you're going to lead just a hedonistic life. I think some purpose beyond that. And the purpose may be whatever. You're helping with the creative economy, you're doing something for society because at a certain stage you want to give back, you want to build a new enterprise because it excites you. You want to be a gig worker, a knowledge gig worker, a nomad. You can do that today. But I would say there's no reason you can't. It's hard to relax on the beach 24 hours a day.
Yeah, that's
So
exactly what I tell
by
them.
all means, go to the beach.
Yeah.
But also keep yourself engaged and think of yourself as a producer and a consumer.
Okay. And then how much is enough? I know it's very subjective, but how much is enough?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I always believe in the formula that sort of H equals R minus E. Happiness equals reality minus expectations.
Okay.
So I think it starts with keeping your expectations reasonable. I wouldn't say low. Obviously, one should enjoy one's life. If you like going on holiday, please go on holiday. You like consuming spirits, consume your spirits, whatever gives you joy. But at the same time, if you're trying to keep up with the Joneses and, at every stage when you make more money, you're always, raising your expectations, your expenditure, everything. That's a very difficult. It's keeping up with the Joneses is really what I think hurts. So my own sense is once your basic needs are met, and by basic I don't mean the Indian uncle who says your basic needs should not include a nice holiday and having fun and whatever you define as a certain set. Don't let it creep up as your income goes up. I think that's let the jaw open up, as it were.
Right.
Let the jaws open.
Right.
I think if one can decide that early on, I decided fairly early on. When I was 30, what would make me happy? Okay. What kind of car I needed to own, how much time I needed on a holiday, whatever. And that's your main kharcha. Did it go up relative to when I was 30? Yes, for sure. But did it go up relative to my income? No.
Right. Yeah. So you mentioned this thing about keeping up with the Joneses and the Jains. When I talk to the young people, I will also tell them that, don't try and match lifestyle and just stay in what you can do. But don't you think that this FOMO is also a fire in the belly? So sometimes I think I'm conflicted that am I telling them the right thing? Because unless they have this desire to go out and conquer the world, they are not going to do these big audacious things. So what is this balance between this fire in the belly, probably caused by FOMO, that I want that life, and having the maturity to say this much is for myself and the rest is extra?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think, maybe some of us in our generation were too conservative because, for us, when we started to accumulate, we were always worried about the downside and, things like that. I think the younger generation is more liberated in that sense. And so there's a certain degree of daringness that I see in this as well. I mean, I'm not one for overconsumption. I think America may have overdone it. But America's strength also was that people didn't think too much about these things. They were just cowboyish in their nature, and they were willing to spend money, enjoy themselves, but they were also great producers. They were liberated in a sense. So, I do see a big positive in that also, is that they travel the world.
Yes.
They see what's happening. They learn. And, we shouldn't criticize that, I think.
Right.
And I think also we shouldn't always judge. I mean, who are we to know? I think I just have a lot of hope. I think I see them as better than we were. They're a liberated generation.
Definitely. They have an abundance mindset.
Yes.
Whereas I think our generation, we grew up in fear and less. So I think rather than their mindset than our mindset.
They will create much more than we
Yeah.
ever were able to.
Yeah. I want to move to a slightly philosophical question around money. Most spiritual traditions tell you to discard money and power both. So it's like an ascetic life is prescribed so that these two forces don't control you. These are very powerful forces, money and power. Uh, you are supposed to let it go because it will control you. The idea is that you should control it should not control you. Now, when I see the story of your life, obviously a lot of wealth was made where you were able to retire at a certain age. And your decisions to work on institution building subsequent to that, on education and now with the Convergence Foundation, you've incubated what, 32,
No, 20 some.
20 some, okay, institutions, which the audience should know is aimed towards building that institutional framework in India, which helps us go towards Vikasit Bharat. Even in personal choices, I mean, in sort of the car that you have driven in here with, let me not mention the brand, but it's very clear to me that money doesn't have you, you have the money. So you have that choice to decide what you want to do with it. A lot of the audience, which is right now in their 20s and 30s, I believe is going to be super affluent because they've got that moment in, I think, the economic history of India where through just sheer hard work and building something, they are poised to be super affluent. Take them through this journey of yours where there must have been a time where you would have decided that this is what I will do with it. It doesn't influence your behavior because with a lot of money comes crassness. Um, what made you this?
I think I had some good influences. So one is being an investor, and early in my life, I read a lot of Warren Buffett,
Yes.
and he's a role model. I mean, person who, despite all the wealth, drove his own car to work every day and lived in the same house. And as he says, he tap danced to work. So he's a role model. He never really overdid it. I think the only indulgence eventually is he flew in a private jet or whatever because of his. But other than that, he had no indulgence. And then my own parents, who I think are very grounded, and I live close to them, and so there's a watchful eye in a way, which is good. I think also in my own head, I somehow have this attached detachment, this concept that material things are important. You want to enjoy it, but never get too attached to them. Some things I did, which hindsight one may look at and say are stupid. I mean, I just said, I never want a really fancy car for myself. My wife may have whatever, but for myself, I don't. That I love beer. I only drink beer. I like the fact that it's egalitarian. The cheapest bottle is $1 a bottle. The most expensive is $2. With wine, it's $10 to whatever, $10,000. And so I never became a wine aficionado. And so I managed to curb myself by just doing these simple things, of saying that you can enjoy certain things without spending a lot of money. And I think once that idea gets in your head, when I was younger, we only always as a family flew economy, then premium economy. Now we walk by and most of my friends were in business class, and my kids would be like, it's a little odd that, but they accepted it. There was no big deal. And then eventually I caved in and said, we'll fly. But I think that I've always managed to me, I get no joy. I mean, today, if you ask me, put me in the back of a plane, I'd have no problem with it at all. So I think being a little detached from I never counted my money, what exactly I was making, my carry or whatever when I was in private equity. People are always doing the math to see how much it is. I was not so interested. So I was, I think, just building that mindset early on, inspired by people like Buffett, to say that, look, it really doesn't matter, but enjoy it still. It's not like I didn't enjoy my life the last 30 years. I think kept me in check. On the power side, I mean, I don't know. I think I'm humble enough to know that ultimately we all move on. I think the part of the problem is we all think that, I mean, when I ran Chris Capital, it's nice to be in a certain position, but then I like the idea of fading away into the sunset and let the institution take over. And honestly, my colleagues who took over were better than me. Um, and the same with all the work I do today. I think as long as I convince myself that, look, I'm lucky to be doing what I'm doing. I'm not the greatest thing, ever. There are many other people. And so I think that keeps me humble. And I attribute a lot to, yes, there's hard work and ambition and all that, but a lot of it is luck. And I think when you have that perspective, you don't let it get to your head.
A lot of successful people attribute it to luck, but obviously they're not talking about the sheer hard work which goes in, right?
You need both, but I
Yeah.
think when you consider, because so many people also work hard and just don't. I've seen it with so many friends of mine. Uh, so I do think you have to keep reminding yourself that, look, you're privileged, you are lucky, and so there's no reason to behave a certain way. I mean, be nice even when you have the money and the power. Be nice to the person who carries your bags for you in a hotel to your hotel room, or to your own driver, or to your staff, or whoever it is. If just don't be watchful that it does get to your head. And the truth is it does, whether it's the money or the fame or the power. So one has to keep reminding oneself it's very important. And I felt that maybe having my parents around was a good check, because not that they had to say it to me, but there was a lot of unsaid stuff.
Which tells me that there's probably some time set out for introspection, because
Yes.
there is, unless you question yourself and
Yes.
allow that time for the discomfort to bubble in.
Yeah.
If something has happened which is you're not proud of, if you don't give that time for that to bubble up and tell you that wasn't very nice. So is that a time in the day that you sort of set aside, just, or is it now a process, like moment to moment?
No, I think I don't do it every day. I think it's
Yeah.
more reflection from time to time, to look back and see, are you happy with what you're doing in your life? And honestly, I've also become more flexible. I think being too rigid, applying my rules to everybody in my family is not fair also. I mean, my wife shouldn't suffer because of me.
Yeah.
So I've become a little bit more liberal, but
Yeah.
it's not like she's going,
Yeah.
there are certain guardrails, and I think
Right.
we're all responsible people. So I think I think we all talk about it and we reflect upon it. We feel guilty if we've done something wrong. I think that's very important, to feel a little bit of guilt if you've either gone overboard with spending money or with misusing your power, etc. And to reflect upon that and see how you can course correct is probably.
So the
None of us are
reflection.
perfect, but
No, that's fine. We are not. We are not. We are transitional beings. We are
we're
not.
transitionalists. You keep and
Yeah.
for each, it's a personal thing at the
It's
end
a
of the day. It's
personal
for you
thing.
to decide
Yeah.
the way you want to live, and be happy at looking at the man in the mirror or the woman in the mirror. That's the most important test for me.
Right.
When I stand in front of that, that's in a way a daily reflection. When I stand in front of the mirror and brushing my teeth, I look at myself and I say, I'm proud of who I am or who I'm becoming.
Right. Right. I'll just move to the last question, and this is really, again, I'm continuing on this whole philosophical journey. A lot of things that we do will get automated. So AI, I believe, will cause a change in the nature of jobs. It'll obviously generate far more than what we can see today. But I think it'll also leave a lot of time for this thing called human agency. What is it that I want to do with my time? And I referred to earlier that these are ironclad structures that we are used to for generations of humanity, of schools, college, job. But with this, suddenly you're out in the open. There can be a time where there is some basic stuff coming in. And human agency, when I see today, is a lot of sort of doom scrolling and just stuff which is this monkey in the brain, makes you do things which may not be what the highest point of evolution should be doing. I also worry that when this does happen, when you're left with resources and no structure. Have you seen that movie Mad Max?
No.
Okay. So it's a dystopian future world.
Yeah.
Like, we're like a generation away sometimes. If this sort of spreads. So what is human agency in the future as we go into it? What happens to us?
Yeah, I don't have the answer, but I somehow feel that the AI that's the antidote to this AI is what I call ancient intelligence. See, knowing how to live a meaningful life, discovering your own humanity, your role in society, it hopefully will free up time. I think I do worry about AI safety and autonomous beings going off the rails. That's a different issue. But I think otherwise I look forward to AI. I think it's going to, in a way, make us more productive, free up some of our time to do things that we really enjoy doing. But then you got to know how to spend that time well. And I think that comes from ancient intelligence, knowing what does it take to live a meaningful life, I don't think our ancestors, once they settled down on farms, were working all the time. They did have to tend to the crops and things like that. But they found their own thing in terms. Most of my work, if you ask me today, is not really work. Most of my reading that I do is for my own personal entertainment. Reading some World Bank report on industrial policy, or reading this or reading that. It's really entertainment. I do a lot of meetings. Is it real work? Somebody looking at it 100 years ago would have said, this isn't work. You're just, even this, is this work on a Sunday? I'm just having a conversation.
Yeah.
People wouldn't have classified that as work
Right.
during the Industrial Revolution. So I think we'll fill our time up with stuff. The real question too is that it gives you the chance to be more human, I think. And for that, looking inward is very important. The ancient scriptures, I think, are the best guide. And so I think that, in a way, India has a lot to offer the world as we go into this AI era.
Right. So on that note, thank you very much. And I think thank you for what you do for the country.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching. This was a conversation which went from growth to philosophy. Tell me what you liked and what you'd like me to talk about again.
Investment in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing. Please read the risk disclosure documents carefully before investing in equity shares, derivatives, mutual fund, and or other instruments traded on the stock exchanges.